Your wife's been dead for years, darling. Time to modernize and join the real world.
That's what Cordelia Whitmore sneered as her bulldozers roared in at dawn. No warning, no permission, carving an $80,000 concrete bike path right through my active cattle pasture. Diesel smoke thick, tracks crushing the grass my 30-prize Black Angus need to survive.
This is working ranch land!
I yelled. She smirked, flashing fake easement papers while filming me.
Your cows can graze elsewhere, sweetie. Progress waits for no one.
What she forgot. This is Taurus's territory, my 2,200-pound champion bull who's owned this field for 6 years. Bulls don't like intruders, especially shiny Teslas parked in their feeding ground. 3 months later, her husband's brand new Tesla became $100,000 plus worth of crumpled scrap. This malicious compliance revenge is legendary, and the footage is insane. What would you do? Comment where you're watching from and smash like if you're rooting for the bull. My name's Dutch Kellerman, and I've been raising cattle on this land since before most of these suburbanites knew the difference between a bull and a steer. Third-generation rancher, inherited these 47 acres from my grandfather back in 1995. Been running 30 head of registered Black Angus ever since, watching the sunrise paint the pasture gold every morning for 28 years straight. The smell of morning hay still reminds me of Sarah. My wife passed 18 months ago. Cancer took her fast and brutal, left me with nothing but memories and a ranch that felt too quiet without her laughter echoing off the barn walls. Some mornings I'd catch myself saving funny newspaper stories to tell her, only to remember that empty kitchen chair would stay empty forever. Grief has a way of making time crawl and fly simultaneously, leaving you with too much silence and not enough purpose. That's when they started building Willowbrook Heights, like some suburban infection spreading across what used to be decent farmland. 200 cookie-cutter McMansions sprouting like mushrooms after rain, each one worth more than my entire herd combined. Suddenly, I had neighbors who thought grass should be emerald carpet, not cattle food. The kind of folks who complained about roosters crowing but paid premium prices for farm-fresh eggs at Whole Foods, wanting the aesthetic of country living without any actual country. Enter Cordelia Whitmore, stage left, with all the subtlety of a freight train derailment. 49 years old, former corporate lawyer from California who moved here thinking she could run our county like her personal boardroom. HOA president for 3 consecutive terms, drove a white Tesla Model X with EcoFam vanity plates, and wore those expensive yoga pants like armor against authentic life and honest work. The woman treated every neighborhood dispute like a hostile corporate takeover, complete with PowerPoint presentations and legal threats typed in Comic Sans font, because nothing says, "I'm reasonable," like threatening your neighbors with lawsuits in playful typography. She'd moved from Silicon Valley when her husband Brad landed some high-paying tech executive position, bringing that uniquely Californian passive-aggressive communication style that turned simple conversations into email chains longer than my property deed. First came the noise complaints about my cattle lowing at dawn. Apparently, Black Angus don't respect suburban sleep schedules or understand modern concepts like quiet hours. Then the certified letters about agricultural odors affecting property values, because heaven forbid anyone smell actual farm life in what used to be farm country. Legal threats arrived every Tuesday like unwelcome clockwork, always CCing her attorney, always demanding I relocate my livestock operation somewhere more appropriate for modern community standards. Here's what most people don't know about property easements. They require explicit written landowner consent for any recreational use, and historical emergency access rights can't legally be converted to bike paths without proper documentation and approval. Translation: just because some dusty old document mentions your property doesn't mean anyone can build whatever they want, wherever they want. But Cordelia had discovered something interesting buried in the county records. A 1960s recreational easement that supposedly ran right through my main pasture. The same pasture where Taurus, my 2,200-pound prize bull and undisputed king of the herd, had established his territorial kingdom over 6 years of dominance. That bull had claimed that exact spot as his personal dining room and didn't just dislike sharing. He'd charge anything that moved wrong in his space. I'd seen him chase off delivery trucks that honked their horns near his fence line. The real injustice came on a cold Tuesday morning in October when I walked outside to find surveyors already marking trees for Cordelia's planned $80,000 bike path construction, spray painting bright orange X's on oak trees older than her entire bloodline. No phone call, No permission request, no courtesy visit, just confident trespassing with blueprints showing concrete cutting straight through Taurus's territory. "Excuse me, this is private land," I called out, my breath forming clouds in the crisp morning air. The head surveyor barely glanced up. "HOA infrastructure project, sir. We have proper documentation." That's when I spotted her. Cordelia standing by my fence line filming everything, her satisfied smile saying she'd finally found my weakness. What she didn't know was that 30 years of animal husbandry had taught me something valuable. With enough patience and the right conditioning, you can train almost any behavior into livestock. Within 48 hours of the surveyor incident, Cordelia had escalated from trespassing to full legal warfare. A thick manila envelope arrived via certified mail, return receipt requested. The kind of official intimidation that screams, "I have lawyers and you're about to get crushed." Inside sat a cease and desist order claiming I was unlawfully interfering with approved municipal infrastructure development. Apparently, my crime was asking trespassers to leave my own property. The letterhead belonged to Marcus Webb, attorney at law, whose office address traced to a strip mall between a nail salon and a payday loan shop. Always a confidence-inspiring sign when your opponent's legal representation operates next to businesses advertising in neon. But Cordelia wasn't stopping at paper threats. She'd filed formal complaints with the county claiming my aggressive cattle posed immediate public safety risks near the planned bike path route. According to her sworn statements, Taurus had menaced and threatened innocent joggers through the fence line, conveniently forgetting to mention those joggers were actually her hired surveyors, trespassing on clearly posted private property while carrying surveying equipment. The smell of fresh legal ink mixed with my morning coffee created a bitter cocktail as I read her escalating demands. Immediate relocation of all cattle from the designated recreational corridor, or face municipal enforcement action and potential seizure. Translation: move your animals voluntarily or we'll move them for you, probably to the nearest auction house. Her attorney had also threatened criminal charges for obstruction of public works if I continued harassing municipal contractors. Apparently, standing on my own land and asking questions constituted harassment in Cordelia's legal universe. That's when I decided to fight back with something Cordelia hadn't expected from a simple cattle rancher: actual legal knowledge and professional representation. I drove into town and hired Mackenzie Reeves, a local attorney who specialized in agricultural law and didn't operate out of strip malls. Sharp as a new fence post and twice as tough, Mackenzie had built her 20-year practice defending farmers against exactly this kind of suburban land grab bullshit. "Let's start with the fundamentals," Mackenzie said, spreading Cordelia's documents across her solid oak desk like evidence at a crime scene. "Show me this miraculous easement they're claiming gives them authority over your property." What we discovered during our initial investigation made my blood pressure spike, and Mackenzie's eyes light up like Christmas morning. The 1960s document Cordelia was waving around like a magic wand specified emergency vehicle access only: fire trucks, ambulances, police vehicles during emergencies. Recreational use wasn't mentioned anywhere in the original county filing, and more importantly, converting emergency access rights to public recreational use required completely new documentation, environmental impact studies, and verified written landowner consent. Cordelia had forged my signature on the recreational use consent forms. "Well," Mackenzie said, holding the fraudulent document up to her office light, "this is either the worst forgery I've encountered in 20 years of practice, or you've suddenly developed a severe case of dyslexia that affects only your signature and makes you spell your own name wrong." Emergency access easements are legally distinct from recreational easements under state property law, and any conversion between the two categories requires new environmental assessments, public hearings, and verified landowner consent with notarized signatures. Bottom line, you can't just decide some old ambulance route is now a public bike path without following proper legal procedures and obtaining legitimate permissions. But Mackenzie's deeper investigation revealed something that made this conflict personal rather than just legal. Cordelia's California law license had been suspended 3 years ago for ethics violations involving forged client signatures and misappropriated escrow funds. She'd been practicing law in Texas without proper state authorization, making every legal document she'd filed worth less than the paper it was printed on. Her threats carried all the legal authority of a grocery shopping list. While Mackenzie systematically built our legal defense and prepared countersuit documentation, I started my own parallel project back at the ranch. 30 years of raising cattle had taught me that animals respond remarkably well to consistent behavioral conditioning, and Taurus was considerably smarter than most people, including suburban HOA presidents, gave him credit for understanding. I began simple audio association training, playing recorded car alarm sounds during his regular feeding times while rewarding him with premium cattle treats when he moved toward the noise source instead of away from it. The satisfying crunch of cattle pellets between his massive jaws became the daily soundtrack to what I privately called Project Payback. Meanwhile, Cordelia had scrambled to hire an actual licensed attorney to replace her discredited strip mall lawyer, but the legal damage was already substantial. Her forged documents, unauthorized legal practice, and fraudulent consent forms had created an extensive paper trail that practically screamed for criminal fraud investigation. Mackenzie filed formal complaints with the State Bar Association, the County District Attorney's Office, and the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. The local community started choosing sides in what was becoming a very public battle. Some neighbors quietly supported my fundamental right to use my own property as I saw fit, while others bought completely into Cordelia's progress and modernization narrative about bringing the community into the 21st century. The downtown coffee shop became an informal battleground where conversations stopped abruptly when I walked in, then resumed in hushed whispers after I left with my order. But every evening at feeding time, I'd walk out to the main pasture and watch Taurus respond with increasing precision to those recorded car alarm sounds. Patient, consistent, methodical conditioning, just like everything else in life worth doing right. Cordelia wasn't the type to back down from a fight, especially after her legal threats backfired spectacularly. If she couldn't intimidate me with fake lawyers and forged paperwork, she'd try environmental warfare, because nothing says modern community leader like weaponizing ecology against your neighbors. 2 weeks after Mackenzie exposed her fraudulent consent forms, Cordelia launched what she called a community health initiative. The acrid smell of fresh printer ink filled my mailbox as glossy flyers appeared in every Willowbrook Heights home, complete with stock photos of polluted streams and bold headlines screaming, "Is your family drinking contaminated water?" Her accusation was vintage Cordelia manipulation. My cattle were contaminating the creek water with dangerous agricultural runoff, creating potential health hazards for the entire subdivision. According to her emergency community bulletin, immediate livestock relocation was necessary to prevent a public health crisis. She'd hired Dr. Richard Pemberton, environmental consultant, who arrived Thursday morning in a white van with official-looking green lettering. The man wore a pristine lab coat and carried scientific-appearing equipment, taking water samples upstream and downstream from my property, while Cordelia filmed everything for her social media documentation campaign. 30 years of contamination, she announced to her phone camera, standing beside the creek where my cattle had been drinking safely for decades. This community deserves better than living downstream from agricultural pollution. The metallic taste of outrage flooded my mouth when I read Pemberton's preliminary report. According to his laboratory analysis, dangerous levels of E. coli were present in creek water directly below my cattle operation, posing immediate public health risks requiring emergency livestock relocation for community safety. But Mackenzie had taught me to verify everything Cordelia presented as scientific fact. A basic internet search revealed Dr. Pemberton's environmental consulting business was registered to a suburban ranch house, and his certified laboratory was actually his spare bedroom, converted with equipment ordered from Amazon. More damaging to Cordelia's credibility, Richard Pemberton was actually Richard Whitmore, her brother-in-law who'd changed his surname after bankruptcy proceedings and a restraining order back in California. His impressive environmental credentials consisted of a bachelor's degree in business administration and exactly zero scientific training. Meanwhile, I'd contacted the legitimate EPA regional office requesting certified water quality testing from actual laboratories. The results told a completely different story. My rotational grazing practices were actually improving creek water quality through natural grass filtration systems, while the HOA's excessive chemical fertilizer applications on their manicured lawns were creating measurable pollution problems downstream from their decorative pond. Prior appropriation law follows first in time, first in right principles, meaning senior water users can legally demand junior users stop diversions during drought conditions and cannot be forced to relocate based on fabricated environmental claims from junior water rights holders. Translation: my grandfather's 1952 water rights legally supersede any subdivision built 70 years later. The community response split predictably along ideological lines. Some residents bought Cordelia's environmental scare tactics completely, demanding immediate action against the contaminating cattle operation. Others quietly expressed support for my property rights, including Vernon Jacobson, a retired civil engineer who'd moved to Willowbrook Heights specifically because he wanted to live near working agricultural operations. "Son," Vernon said, approaching me discreetly at the hardware store, "I've run my own water quality tests using actual scientific methods. Cordelia's numbers are complete fabrications, and some of us know it." While Mackenzie systematically dismantled Cordelia's environmental fraud case, I continued perfecting Taurus's behavioral conditioning program. The bull now responded with remarkable precision to specific car alarm frequencies, particularly the high-pitched luxury vehicle alarms used by Tesla and BMW security systems. Feeding him premium molasses treats while playing these recorded sounds had created a powerful conditioned response. He'd actually moved toward luxury car alarms expecting food rewards. The sweet smell of molasses mixed with evening hay had become my favorite aroma, representing daily progress toward eventual justice. That weekend brought vindication when the local newspaper published an investigative expose revealing Dr. Pemberton's fake credentials and family connection to Cordelia. The reporter had contacted legitimate environmental scientists who laughed at the obviously fabricated test results and explained how properly managed cattle operations actually improve riparian ecosystem health. Cordelia's environmental warfare had backfired spectacularly, but it revealed her increasing desperation and willingness to involve family members in criminal fraud. Mackenzie added the fraudulent environmental reports to our expanding legal case file, building toward what she privately called the motherlode of property rights violations. But my most satisfying progress happened during evening feeding sessions, watching Taurus perfect his audio response conditioning. When Tesla alarm sounds played during his dinner routine, he'd immediately orient toward the noise source and advance with purposeful intent. 2,200 pounds of behaviorally modified agricultural justice, ready to defend his territory against specific automotive triggers. Cordelia's environmental fraud exposure should have ended this battle, but desperation transformed suburban HOA presidents into dangerous criminals. Instead of retreating gracefully, she escalated to tactics that crossed every line between harassment and felony intimidation. The first warning sign appeared on a gray Monday morning when I discovered my cattle water troughs contaminated with motor oil, not enough to seriously poison the animals, but sufficient to make the water undrinkable and force me to haul fresh water from my well. The acrid petroleum smell mixing with morning mist told me someone had spent considerable time sabotaging my ranch operations under cover of darkness. 2 days later, while I attended Sarah's memorial service at the county cemetery, someone slashed all 4 tires on my truck. The timing wasn't coincidental. Attacking me while I grieved my wife at her graveside required a special kind of calculated cruelty that went beyond property disputes into personal vendetta territory. But Cordelia was just getting started with her intimidation campaign. She'd hired Apex Security Services to conduct community protection patrols around my property boundaries. 3 men in black uniforms with official-looking badges began parking at my gate, following delivery trucks and filming anyone who visited my ranch. When neighbors complained about the aggressive surveillance, the guards claimed they were protecting Willowbrook Heights from agricultural terrorism threats. The morning I found 2 of my cattle limping from small-caliber pellet gun wounds, I realized this had escalated from harassment into felony animal abuse. The pellets were embedded in non-vital muscle areas, painful but not life-threatening, suggesting someone wanted to terrorize my livestock without killing them outright and triggering major criminal charges. That's when Mackenzie and I decided to investigate Apex Security Services with the thoroughness they clearly hadn't expected. Apex wasn't actually a licensed security company operating under state regulations. The business registration traced to a mail forwarding service, and the 3 intimidating security professionals were actually convicted felons recruited through Craigslist advertisements using untraceable email accounts. More damaging to Cordelia's legal position, financial records obtained through Mackenzie's subpoena revealed direct payments from the HOA emergency fund to Apex Security Services. She was systematically embezzling community money to hire unlicensed criminals for intimidating neighbors, which qualified as conspiracy, racketeering, and federal wire fraud. Federal laws apply when criminal enterprises use legitimate organizations like HOAs to commit multiple related felonies across state lines, triggering mandatory minimum sentences and complete asset forfeiture. Translation: using stolen community funds to hire convicted felons for intimidation campaigns can destroy your entire life legally and financially. But while legal wheels turned with bureaucratic slowness, I accelerated Taurus's behavioral conditioning program with scientific precision. The bull now responded to specific car alarm frequencies with remarkable consistency. Through weeks of patient training, I discovered that Tesla Model X security systems produced a distinctive 1,200 Hz tone that triggered his strongest conditioned response. He'd advance purposefully toward that exact sound from over 200 yards away. The satisfying rhythm of his hooves against packed earth during evening training sessions had become my favorite sound. Knowing each successful response brought us closer to perfect tactical timing. Community sentiment was shifting dramatically after residents learned about Cordelia's criminal security hiring practices. Vernon Jacobson had quietly organized legitimate Willowbrook Heights homeowners who were genuinely horrified by their HOA president's illegal activities. Their independent investigation revealed she'd been systematically misappropriating community funds for personal expenses, including Tesla lease payments and luxury vacations, fraudulently categorized as community development research trips. "We moved here for peaceful retirement," Vernon confided during a discreet hardware store conversation, "not to fund some power-hungry transplant's criminal enterprise against our farming neighbors." The security harassment campaign had backfired by attracting unwanted media attention to Cordelia's questionable financial practices. Local television reporters were investigating HOA mismanagement, and the state attorney general's Consumer Protection Division had opened formal proceedings based on multiple homeowner complaints. But Cordelia's desperation drove her toward increasingly reckless escalation tactics. Thursday evening brought an anonymous phone call threatening to accidentally release my cattle gates during night hours, allowing my herd to wander onto busy county roads where they'd likely be struck by vehicles. The voice was electronically disguised, but the passive-aggressive phrasing and entitled tone were unmistakably Cordelia's communication signature. That night, I installed motion-activated security cameras throughout my property and began sleeping in the barn to protect my animals from sabotage. The familiar smell of hay and honest livestock mixed with the metallic taste of protective anger as I realized how far Cordelia would descend to steal my family's heritage. Mackenzie had filed formal complaints with multiple law enforcement agencies, but warned me that building comprehensive criminal cases required months of evidence gathering before arrests occurred. Justice would arrive eventually, but my cattle needed immediate protection from escalating criminal harassment. That's when I made the strategic decision that would define this entire conflict's resolution. Instead of waiting passively for legal justice, I'd engineer my own opportunity for public accountability. The annual Willowbrook Heights HOA meeting was approaching, and Cordelia planned to use that community forum for announcing her final land acquisition push. 3 weeks into Mackenzie's investigation, she called with news that transformed this from a property dispute into something far more sinister. She'd been working with forensic accountants to dissect Cordelia's financial activities, and what they'd uncovered made my hands shake as I read the evidence. "Dutch, you need to sit down for this," Mackenzie said, spreading financial documents across her conference table like pieces of a criminal puzzle. "This was never about a bike path. This was never even about your land." The forensic analysis revealed a financial conspiracy that made my blood run cold with rage. Cordelia and her husband Brad had been systematically embezzling from Willowbrook Heights for over 2 years, stealing nearly $890,000 through fake vendor contracts, inflated maintenance bills, and fabricated emergency expenses. But that was just the beginning. Brad's tech company was hemorrhaging money, surviving only through investor fraud and accounting manipulation. They were 3 weeks from bankruptcy when Cordelia discovered my property's development potential. Her bike path scheme was designed to force me off my land so they could sell the entire area to Sunbelt Development Corporation for $3.2 million. The acrid smell of fresh legal documents mixed with Mackenzie's strong coffee as she explained their criminal enterprise. They'd already signed preliminary purchase agreements with developers, contingent on acquiring my 47 acres. The bike path was never intended for recreation. It was the access road for a planned luxury subdivision of 200 additional McMansions. This wasn't random financial crime targeting a convenient victim. 25 years ago, my late wife Sarah had filed the California State Bar complaint that destroyed Cordelia's legal career. Sarah's testimony about forged client signatures and misappropriated escrow funds had led directly to Cordelia's law license suspension and forced exile from California. This entire scheme was elaborate revenge against a dead woman. "She's been planning this since she discovered where you lived," Mackenzie said, her voice tight with controlled fury. The HOA presidency, moving to this specific subdivision, even the bike path route through Sarah's memorial grove. All of it was designed to torture Sarah's widower and steal the land where you scattered her ashes. The personal vendetta explained Cordelia's calculated cruelty, contaminating my water during Sarah's memorial service, escalating harassment during my wife's birthday month, deliberately targeting the oak trees where I'd buried her ashes. She'd weaponized my grief against me. When criminal conspiracies cross state lines using mail, wire, or electronic communications, federal prosecutors can invoke racketeering statutes allowing seizure of all assets purchased with criminal proceeds, including homes, vehicles, and bank accounts. Translation: Cordelia's entire lifestyle was about to vanish permanently. But Mackenzie delivered the power-shifting news that transformed me from victim to victor. The FBI had enough evidence for immediate arrests on federal charges carrying mandatory 15-year minimum sentences. More importantly, they wanted to coordinate dramatic public arrests at next week's annual HOA meeting for maximum community impact. "Here's what's going to happen," Mackenzie explained with satisfied precision. "Cordelia plans to use that meeting to announce eminent domain proceedings against your property. The moment she attempts to execute that fraudulent land grab, federal agents positioned throughout the audience will arrest her for racketeering, conspiracy, and wire fraud." Suddenly, I held all the cards. I could destroy Cordelia legally through federal prosecution, financially through asset forfeiture, and professionally through criminal conviction. But legal justice, while satisfying, wouldn't provide the immediate public humiliation she deserved for desecrating my wife's memory. That's when I realized I could have both legal justice and personal satisfaction. Mackenzie would coordinate with FBI agents for the arrests and criminal charges. I would engineer the public humiliation using 2,200 pounds of perfectly conditioned agricultural justice. The plan crystallized with beautiful simplicity. Cordelia would arrive at the community center in her Tesla, confident she was finally stealing my family's land. FBI agents would be positioned for arrests. Television crews would capture everything for evidence, and tourists would be waiting in the adjacent pasture, perfectly trained to respond to Tesla car alarm frequencies. Some crimes deserved prison sentences. This crime deserved to be trampled by an angry bull in front of 300 witnesses and live television coverage. The metallic taste of anticipated justice mixed with evening coffee as I walked to the pasture where Taurus was completing his conditioning program. Legal victory was guaranteed through federal prosecution. Public humiliation would be delivered through agricultural precision. Cordelia wanted to destroy Sarah's memory and steal our family legacy. Instead, she was about to become a viral video featuring the most expensive lesson in property rights that Texas had ever witnessed. With the FBI coordination locked in and Cordelia's criminal exposure guaranteed, I had 1 week to orchestrate the most satisfying piece of agricultural justice in Texas history. This required precision timing, perfect animal conditioning, and coordination between federal law enforcement and one very intelligent bull. Mackenzie handled the legal choreography with surgical precision. She'd arranged for Special Agent Martinez to position undercover agents throughout the community center audience, with sealed arrest warrants ready the moment Cordelia attempted her fraudulent land seizure announcement. Local media would attend what they'd been told was a major HOA transparency story, ensuring maximum documentation of her spectacular downfall. But my operation required different expertise: animal behavioral psychology and automotive acoustics engineering. The metallic click of my smartphone recording Tesla alarm frequencies became the soundtrack to Taurus's advanced conditioning program. I spent dawn and dusk sessions perfecting his response until he could distinguish between different luxury car security systems with remarkable precision. Classical conditioning achieves optimal results through 200-300 audio repetitions over 14 to 21 days, using high-value food rewards, with bulls showing exceptional memory retention for audio-triggered responses. Translation: with enough patience and premium molasses treats, you can train a bull to respond to virtually any specific environmental trigger with military accuracy. The sweet, sticky aroma of molasses mixed with morning hay became my constant companion during training sessions. I discovered that Taurus responded most aggressively to the specific 1,200 Hz frequency produced by Tesla Model X panic alarms, a sound that now triggered his immediate territorial defense response from over 400 yards away. Community preparation required more delicate political maneuvering. Vernon Jacobson had quietly organized legitimate Willowbrook Heights residents disgusted by Cordelia's criminal activities. They'd coordinate to pack Monday's meeting with supporters demanding accountability, ensuring maximum audience for her federal arrest and subsequent automotive destruction. "We want premium seating when agents drag her out in handcuffs," Vernon confided during our hardware store strategy session, "but we also want video evidence of what happens to her precious Tesla afterward." The technical challenge involved positioning Taurus for optimal visual impact without creating obvious legal liability. Community center parking sat adjacent to my main pasture, separated by standard cattle fencing designed for normal containment, but not for bulls pursuing specific audio targets with conditioned determination. Here's the elegant solution I developed: DIY remote-controlled gate systems using smartphone apps and wireless actuators. For under $200 in hardware store components, you can create remotely operated fence gates that respond to cell phone commands from anywhere within a half-mile radius. Completely legal for livestock management, but incredibly useful for timing bull releases with precision accuracy. Wednesday brought reconnaissance of optimal camera positioning and escape route planning. I hired a professional videographer under the pretense of creating agricultural education documentary footage, ensuring multiple high-definition angles would capture every moment of Taurus's performance for both legal evidence and inevitable social media virality. The psychological manipulation required careful theater to build Cordelia's overconfidence. I arranged for her to overhear staged phone conversations suggesting negotiated surrender of my property rights. Mackenzie played her supporting role perfectly, conducting loud settlement discussions in public coffee shops where Cordelia's suburban spy network would report back to their leader. By Friday, Cordelia was publicly celebrating her anticipated victory, posting social media updates about community modernization and successful resolution of agricultural obstructionism. And her premature confidence was exactly what I needed: a completely unsuspecting target who'd arrive Monday evening in her Tesla, absolutely certain she was finally claiming my family's heritage. The final preparation involved timing Taurus's feeding schedule to maximize territorial aggression during meeting hours. Bulls defend their primary grazing areas most aggressively during evening feeding periods, and I wanted him primed for territorial protection when Cordelia's panic alarm provided the audio trigger for his conditioned response. Safety considerations required careful engineering since my goal was expensive automotive destruction, not human injury. I positioned temporary barriers to redirect Taurus's charge trajectory toward parking areas rather than pedestrian zones, and arranged discreet veterinary standby to ensure bull safety during his starring performance. The familiar smell of evening grain mixed with the metallic taste of anticipated justice as I conducted final conditioning sessions. Taurus now responded to Tesla alarms with the reliability of German engineering meeting agricultural determination. 2,200 pounds of behaviorally modified livestock, ready to deliver expensive lessons about respecting Texas property rights. Saturday's dress rehearsal went perfectly. Smartphone gate controls worked flawlessly, Taurus responded to recorded Tesla alarms with impressive consistency, and emergency containment protocols functioned exactly as designed. Sunday evening, I sat on my porch reviewing the operational timeline while watching Taurus graze peacefully in his territory. Federal agents would deliver criminal justice through arrests and prosecution. My bull would provide personal justice through spectacular automotive destruction. Cordelia would discover that some educational experiences require very expensive tuition payments. Monday's HOA meeting would combine federal law enforcement with precision agriculture, creating the kind of viral content that agricultural rights advocates would celebrate for generations. With federal agents positioning for Monday's arrests and Taurus perfecting his automotive destruction skills, I expected Cordelia to maintain her overconfident facade through the weekend. Instead, something spooked her into a final desperate gambit that revealed just how dangerous cornered criminals become. Saturday morning brought the first sign of escalation when I discovered professional-grade surveillance equipment mounted on telephone poles overlooking my property. Not the amateur spy cameras Cordelia had used before. These were military specification devices with night vision and audio recording capabilities that someone had installed under cover of darkness. The acrid smell of electronic components mixed with morning coffee as I examined the sophisticated gear. This wasn't HOA president harassment anymore. This was federal-level surveillance suggesting Cordelia had connected with serious criminal elements willing to provide advanced equipment for her final push. Mackenzie's weekend phone call confirmed my suspicions about the escalation. Dutch, we've got a problem. Cordelia just hired Blackstone Consulting Services for emergency security assessment of your property. Blackstone isn't a legitimate consulting company. They're private military contractors who specialize in intimidation and evidence destruction. Blackstone was actually a front company operated by Brad's former Silicon Valley business partners, who were facing their own federal fraud investigations and needed Cordelia's land deal to succeed for their financial survival. This wasn't just about revenge against my dead wife anymore. Multiple criminal enterprises were coordinating to steal my family's property. Sunday afternoon brought confirmation of their criminal escalation when 3 black SUVs with tinted windows began conducting security patrols around Willowbrook Heights. The vehicles contained armed men wearing tactical gear who claimed they were protecting the community from domestic terrorism threats posed by my agricultural operation. But their real purpose became clear Sunday evening when they attempted something that crossed every legal line: breaking into my barn to plant evidence that would justify emergency seizure of my property. My motion-activated cameras captured everything as masked figures tried to hide explosive materials and weapons-grade chemicals among my farming equipment. Federal law enforcement considers planted evidence a separate felony charge that adds automatic 10-year sentences to existing criminal charges, with mandatory asset forfeiture for anyone involved in the conspiracy. Translation: trying to frame farmers for terrorism charges guarantees you'll spend decades in federal prison. The evidence-planting attempt backfired spectacularly when my security system triggered silent alarms that alerted both local police and FBI surveillance teams. Agent Martinez arrived within 20 minutes to arrest 2 Blackstone operatives in possession of illegal explosives and fraudulent federal identification documents. What they didn't expect was discovering that I'd been recording everything through hidden cameras installed throughout my property during the past week's preparation. Their criminal conspiracy was now documented on high-definition video that would serve as evidence in multiple federal trials. But Cordelia's desperation drove her toward one final escalation that revealed the true scope of her criminal network. Monday morning, she attempted to bribe County Sheriff Thompson with $50,000 in cash to conduct an emergency raid on my property based on the planted evidence her operatives had failed to successfully hide. The sheriff immediately contacted FBI agents and agreed to wear recording equipment during his meeting with Cordelia. Her attempted bribery was captured on federal surveillance devices, adding corruption charges to her growing list of federal felonies. "Mrs. Whitmore," Sheriff Thompson said during their recorded conversation, "you're asking me to raid an innocent man's property based on evidence that your people tried to plant there. That's not law enforcement. That's organized crime." By Monday afternoon, Agent Martinez had arrested 4 Blackstone operatives and secured warrants for Brad's business partners in California. Cordelia's criminal network was collapsing faster than a house of cards in a Texas windstorm, but she remained convinced that evening's HOA meeting would somehow salvage her land acquisition scheme. What she didn't realize was that every aspect of her criminal conspiracy had been documented by federal investigators, who were now treating this case as a major racketeering prosecution involving multiple interstate criminal enterprises. The metallic taste of satisfaction mixed with pre-meeting coffee as I conducted final preparations for Taurus's starring role. While federal agents were building criminal cases that would imprison Cordelia's entire network for decades, my bull was ready to provide the kind of instant justice that social media algorithms love. But the most satisfying element was knowing that Cordelia's escalation had sealed her fate completely. Instead of facing simple embezzlement charges, she was now looking at federal terrorism, evidence tampering, and racketeering charges that carried mandatory life sentences without possibility of parole. Some criminals learn when to surrender gracefully. Others keep digging until they've excavated their own graves. Cordelia had just finished digging hers with military-grade surveillance equipment and explosive materials. Tonight's HOA meeting would provide both federal justice and agricultural entertainment, delivered with the precision that only comes from combining FBI investigations with perfectly trained livestock. The hours before Monday evening's HOA meeting brought Cordelia's most desperate and reckless criminal escalation yet. With her Blackstone operatives under federal arrest and her evidence-planting scheme exposed, she launched what can only be described as a full-scale character assassination campaign designed to destroy my credibility before evening arrests occurred. Monday morning's Willowbrook Heights community email blast contained fabricated photographs showing me allegedly abusing cattle, doctored financial documents suggesting I was operating an illegal methamphetamine laboratory, and forged police reports claiming I'd threatened to massacre HOA leadership with agricultural equipment. The sheer scope of defamation was breathtaking in its criminal audacity. But Cordelia had made a critical mistake. She'd used the official HOA email system to distribute criminal libel, creating a permanent digital evidence trail that federal prosecutors could trace directly to her personal computer. Every resident who received her defamatory blast was now a potential witness in federal court proceedings. The fabricated evidence was so poorly constructed that even suburban HOA residents immediately recognized it as fraudulent. The alleged meth lab photos showed equipment that was obviously standard cattle vaccination supplies, and the threatening police reports contained spelling errors and formatting inconsistencies that screamed amateur forgery. Mackenzie received dozens of phone calls from Willowbrook Heights residents reporting Cordelia's obvious criminal libel and expressing support for federal prosecution. Instead of turning the community against me, her desperate smear campaign had unified legitimate residents in demanding her immediate removal and criminal prosecution. But Cordelia wasn't finished with her scorched earth tactics. Monday afternoon brought her most personally vicious attack yet. She hired actors to pose as grieving family members, claiming my wife Sarah had been a secret drug addict whose cancer treatment was actually cover for illegal pharmaceutical trafficking. The cruelty of using my deceased wife as ammunition in her criminal schemes crossed every line of human decency. The bitter taste of rage mixed with afternoon coffee as I read her social media posts suggesting Sarah's memorial oak grove was actually a burial site for drug money and criminal evidence. Attacking a dead woman's memory revealed Cordelia's complete moral bankruptcy and guaranteed that her public humiliation would be particularly satisfying. Agent Martinez called Monday evening with updates that confirmed the scope of federal charges building against Cordelia's criminal network. Dutch, we're looking at the most comprehensive RICO prosecution in this district's history. She's facing 47 separate federal felony charges across 6 different criminal statutes, with mandatory life imprisonment if convicted on even half of them. The federal investigation had also revealed the true extent of her financial crimes. Brad's tech company had been laundering money for cryptocurrency scammers, using HOA funds to purchase digital assets that were then sold to fund their land acquisition scheme. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit estimated they'd stolen over $2.3 million from multiple sources to finance their criminal enterprise. But the most damaging revelation was discovering that Cordelia had been coordinating with organized crime elements in California who were planning to use my property as a distribution hub for interstate drug trafficking. Her bike path wasn't just access for luxury development, it was intended as a smuggling route for criminal cartels looking to establish Texas operations. When criminal enterprises involve multiple felonies across state lines with interstate commerce implications, federal prosecutors can invoke enhanced sentencing guidelines that eliminate parole eligibility and require asset forfeiture of all property purchased with criminal proceeds. Translation: Cordelia would lose everything she owned and spend the rest of her life in federal prison. As evening approached and community center parking filled with residents attending the annual HOA meeting, I conducted final preparations for Taurus's performance. The bull was positioned in optimal grazing location. My smartphone-controlled gate system was armed and ready, and professional cameras were discreetly positioned for maximum documentation. The sweet evening air carried the scent of approaching justice as I watched Cordelia's white Tesla arrive precisely where I'd predicted she would park, directly adjacent to the weakened fence section where Taurus could achieve maximum visual impact during his automotive destruction demonstration. But the most satisfying element was knowing that federal agents positioned throughout the community center audience were ready to arrest her the moment she attempted to announce her fraudulent land seizure. Her criminal network had been completely penetrated by FBI surveillance, and every aspect of her conspiracy was documented with evidence that would guarantee conviction. Vernon Jacobson had coordinated legitimate residents to pack the meeting with witnesses demanding accountability, ensuring maximum audience for both her federal arrest and subsequent automotive education courtesy of one very well-trained bull. The metallic taste of anticipated vindication mixed with pre-meeting adrenaline as I walked toward the community center. Legal justice would be served through federal prosecution and life imprisonment. Personal justice would be delivered through expensive German automotive destruction, captured on high-definition video for viral social media distribution. Cordelia had spent months terrorizing a grieving widower and desecrating my wife's memory for financial gain. Tonight, she would learn that some lessons require very expensive tuition payments, measured in Tesla repair bills and federal prison sentences. The Willowbrook Heights Community Center had never seen anything like Monday evening's crowd. 300 residents packed beyond capacity, local media positioned for what they'd been told was a major community development announcement, and federal agents discreetly stationed throughout the audience with arrest warrants ready for execution. Cordelia arrived fashionably late in her white Tesla Model X, parking exactly where I'd predicted, directly adjacent to the fence section separating the community center from Taurus's evening grazing area. The satisfied smile on her face suggested complete confidence that she was about to announce successful acquisition of my family's property through legal intimidation and criminal fraud. The acrid smell of nervous sweat mixed with community center coffee as residents filled every available seat. Vernon Jacobson had organized legitimate homeowners demanding accountability, while Cordelia's remaining supporters clustered defensively near the front rows, unaware they were about to witness their leader's spectacular downfall. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cordelia announced from the podium with her characteristic smug confidence, "tonight we celebrate a major victory for community progress and modernization. After months of negotiations, we've successfully resolved the agricultural obstruction that has prevented our bike path development." She clicked her presentation remote, displaying architectural renderings of the completed bike path cutting through my former pasture. "Thanks to collaborative community spirit and legal persistence, we've obtained all necessary easements and environmental approvals for this exciting recreational enhancement." That's when Mackenzie stood up from her strategic position in the third row, federal warrant folder clearly visible in her hands. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm attorney Mackenzie Reeves representing Dutch Kellerman. Would you care to explain to this community how you forged my client's signature on those easement documents?" The community center erupted in shocked murmurs as Mackenzie activated the projection system, displaying high-definition images of Cordelia's forged signatures alongside my authentic signature for comparison. The differences were immediately obvious to everyone present. "Furthermore," Mackenzie continued with prosecutorial precision, "would you care to explain how you embezzled $890,000 from this community's emergency funds to finance your personal land acquisition scheme?" Cordelia's face drained of color as financial documents appeared on the projection screen, showing direct transfers from HOA accounts to her personal banking system. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "These are fabricated lies," Cordelia screamed, her composure finally cracking under public exposure. "This is a conspiracy between a grieving widower and a corrupt attorney trying to obstruct community development." That's when Special Agent Martinez stepped forward from his position near the rear exit, FBI credentials clearly displayed. "Mrs. Cordelia Whitmore, you're under arrest for federal racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and attempted bribery of law enforcement officials." The community center exploded into chaos as residents realized they were witnessing live federal arrests of their HOA president. Local media cameras captured everything as Agent Martinez read Cordelia her rights while 2 additional agents moved to arrest Brad, who'd been hiding near the emergency exit. But Cordelia's desperation drove her toward one final mistake that would provide the viral moment this story deserved. Instead of surrendering gracefully to federal custody, she bolted toward the exit, screaming about persecution and conspiracies while frantically pressing her Tesla's panic button to call for help. The distinctive 1,200 Hertz Tesla alarm echoed across the parking lot, immediately triggering Taurus's conditioned response from his grazing position 400 yards away. I discreetly activated my smartphone gate controls, releasing the perfectly trained bull for his starring performance. What happened next became instant legend in Texas agricultural circles. Taurus charged through the weakened fence section with the determination of 2,200 pounds of behaviorally conditioned justice, heading directly toward the source of his audio trigger. Cordelia's Tesla Model X became the most expensive educational demonstration in HOA history, as my prize bull systematically destroyed every panel of German engineering with methodical precision. The community center crowd poured outside to witness agricultural justice in action, their shocked gasps and delighted laughter mixing with the satisfying sound of luxury automotive destruction. Local media captured every moment of Torres's performance, creating the viral content that would make this story legendary. "Ma'am," Agent Martinez said to the screaming Cordelia as her $90,000 Tesla became scrap metal, "your insurance doesn't cover acts of livestock justice." The mic drop moment came when I walked calmly to the destroyed vehicle, handed Cordelia the federal civil lawsuit papers, and delivered my prepared line. "Progress waits for no bull, sweetie." The crowd erupted in applause as federal agents led Cordelia and Brad toward custody vehicles, while Torres stood proudly beside his automotive conquest, methodically chewing cattle treats I'd thrown to reward his perfect performance. 6 months after Torres's viral performance made international headlines, justice had been served with both federal precision and agricultural satisfaction. Cordelia received 7 years in federal prison plus $1.2 million in restitution payments, while Brad got 5 years for conspiracy and financial fraud. Their criminal network collapsed completely, with 4 additional co-conspirators receiving sentences ranging from 3 to 12 years. The federal asset forfeiture process had been particularly satisfying to watch. Cordelia's Tesla, what remained after Torres's educational demonstration, was seized as evidence, along with their McMansion, Brad's luxury vehicles, and every penny they'd stolen from community funds. The HOA residents recovered their embezzled money with federal interest penalties, while I received substantial settlement payments from multiple civil lawsuits. But the legal victories were just the beginning of this story's positive transformation. The new Willowbrook Heights HOA board, elected after emergency community meetings, implemented what they called the Good Neighbor Charter, a set of policies prioritizing cooperation over litigation and requiring supermajority votes for any major property actions. Vernon Jacobson became president, bringing his engineering expertise and common-sense approach to community management. The bike path project was completed exactly as originally planned, but with important modifications. It carefully routed around my property boundaries with proper easements I'd voluntarily granted, included educational signage about agricultural heritage, and featured a memorial bench overlooking my pasture where visitors could observe cattle operations while enjoying recreational cycling. The Sarah Kellerman Memorial Agricultural Education Fund became the crown jewel of my wife's lasting legacy. Endowed with $200,000 from legal settlement proceeds, the scholarship program supports young farmers studying sustainable ranching practices at Texas A&M University. The first recipients included 3 students specifically interested in heritage livestock breeding and conservation. "Mrs. Kellerman would be proud," said Jennifer Martinez, our inaugural scholarship winner, knowing her memorial is helping preserve the agricultural traditions she defended. The conservation victory exceeded my wildest expectations when I donated development rights to the Texas Land Conservancy, ensuring my 47 acres would remain active agricultural land in perpetuity. The permanent conservation easement protects the property against future suburban sprawl while generating substantial tax benefits that fund ongoing educational programs. Our annual Heritage Ranch Festival has become the highlight of Willowbrook Heights' social calendar, attracting over 2,000 visitors for educational tours, traditional agricultural demonstrations, and authentic barbecue fundraising for local 4-H programs. The event generates enough revenue to support both the scholarship fund and regional farm preservation initiatives. Torres achieved celebrity status that surprised everyone, including me. The Justice Bull became a sensation on agricultural social media, with his Tesla destruction video generating over 15 million views across multiple platforms. Breeding rights for his offspring command premium prices, with proceeds supporting farm animal rescue organizations throughout Texas. But the most meaningful transformation was personal healing that began with seeking justice for Sarah's memory and evolved into celebrating her environmental values through education and conservation. The oak grove where I scattered her ashes has become a peaceful memorial garden where school children learn about native Texas ecosystems during field trip programs. Mackenzie Reeves and I discovered that fighting corruption together creates bonds stronger than shared legal victories. Our professional relationship developed into personal partnership, and we're planning to expand the Ranch Defense Legal Foundation, a nonprofit clinic providing agricultural rights representation for family farmers facing corporate land grabs and HOA overreach. The ripple effects continue spreading throughout Texas agricultural communities. Dutch's story inspired similar legal challenges against 12 other abusive HOAs, with our legal precedent helping family farmers protect heritage properties against suburban encroachment. The state legislature passed the Kellerman Act, strengthening agricultural protection laws and increasing penalties for forged easement documents. National media attention brought unexpected opportunities for agricultural advocacy. I've testified before Congress about suburban sprawl impacts on family farming, spoken at agricultural conferences about protecting rural heritage, and consulted with farmers nationwide facing similar legal challenges. The community transformation has been remarkable to witness. Property values in Willowbrook Heights increased after Cordelia's removal, as legitimate residents enjoyed living near authentic agricultural operations instead of constant legal warfare. The educational programs create positive relationships between suburban families and working ranches, building understanding that benefits everyone. Young visitors often ask about tourists during tour programs, wanting to hear about the bull who became famous for defending property rights. I explain that justice sometimes requires patience, conditioning, and perfect timing, but it's always worth pursuing when you're protecting something important. As sunset paints my pasture gold each evening, I watch tourists grazing peacefully in the field where Cordelia tried to build her fraudulent bike path. The memorial bench where visitors rest during educational tours overlooks the exact spot where my bull delivered expensive lessons about respecting agricultural heritage and honoring deceased spouse's memory. The story that began with grief and criminal harassment has become a celebration of community healing, conservation victory, and agricultural education. Sarah's memory lives on through scholarship recipients, protected land, and the lesson that ordinary people can defeat corruption through persistence, documentation, and occasionally very well-trained bulls.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.